Welcome to Rock and Roll High School, your choice for in-depth and personal conversations with the most legendary artists in the history of contemporary music. Come with us as we explore the albums and songs that have become the soundtrack of our lives. Here's your host, Pete Ganbarg.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Rock and Roll High School. Our guest this week is one of the most beloved voices of American folk music, a singer, songwriter, activist, and spiritual force whose work has helped soundtrack some of the most profound moments in our nation's history, Noel Paul Stookey of Peter, Paul, and Mary. As Paul, in one of the most influential folk trios of all time, Noel helped bring songs like If I Had a Hammer, Blowin' in the Wind, Puff the Magic Dragon, and Leaving on a Jet Plane into the global consciousness, delivering harmony, humor, and humanity at a moment when the world desperately needed all three. Alongside Peter Yarrow and Mary Travers, Noel Paul Stookey stood at the front lines of the civil rights and peace movements, performing at the 1963 March on Washington, shortly before Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, and giving voice to a generation seeking justice. Beyond the trio, Noel's solo career has been just as impactful, from writing the timeless standard The Wedding Song, There Is Love, to pioneering artist-activist work through his nonprofit Music to Life, to continuing his lifelong exploration of faith, truth, and social change through music. From his early days emceeing at the Gaslight Cafe in Greenwich Village, to becoming a guiding elder of American folk music, Noel's story is one of creativity, conscience, and connection. Noel Paul Stookey joins us now.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Rock and Roll High School. I am very, very, very honored to be welcoming our guest today. I didn't ask you where you are, but I assume you're in Maine.
I am. Blue Hill, Maine, on the coast. A very gray kind of winter is here, but the snow hasn't arrived quite yet day.
Okay, very good. So from Blue Hill, Maine, I am thrilled to welcome Noel Paul Stookey. Hi, Noel.
Hi there. Hi there. Rock and Roll High School.
Rock and Roll High School. You know what this is? This is our attempt to educate our audience on the history of contemporary music as told by the people who helped create it. And, case in point, here you are.
Yeah, I'm wondering how far back you want to go in my history.
Well, I think it's public knowledge that you are in your mid-80s now, and you came to Greenwich Village from Michigan in 1958, 59, is that right?
That would have been about right. 59.
Yeah, so you're 21, 22 years old, a small town kid in the big city, and here we are. And I think that's a great place to start. Why don't you tell us all about how you made your way to New York and what happened on that fateful series of days?
Well, we have to go back a little further than what you've suggested, Pete. We have to go back to that young kid in Michigan who was on the Ed McKenzie talent show with his rock and roll group called the Birds of Paradise.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was a devotee as well as, four of my compatriots from high school were, to rhythm and blues. And it was definitely happening. Records that we would obtain from the Charms and other members, the Dominoes from that era.
So this is the early days of rock and roll. The rock and roll era starts circa 1955 with Bill Haley and Rock Around the Clock, and this is just a couple of years later.
Yeah, but that's all stolen from rhythm and blues that had its start in like or it's burgeoning in 1950, 1951.
Right.
Nonetheless, in an attempt to be original, as I think many who borrowed from the Afro-American music tried to be, I wrote a theme song for my group, and I know that you and your listeners really want to hear it. So even though I can't play the guitar, it probably only took 3 chords on the guitar, but the essence of the song was, The birds of paradise are here to say hello, the only way they know is with the song. And and that was Noel Stookey at the age of, well, let's say, 18.
How many other birds of paradises were there in your group?
There were 5 of us. There's a record cover somewhere in the house here, but I don't have it handy.
Rock and Roll High School, you get a demerit there.
Yeah, really. Anyway, they were a great group. We did a lot, mostly benefits, but we did manage to cut a record, which was pretty unusual for the 50s, a 10-inch vinyl that was terrible production value, recorded well, but the vinyl itself was faulty. And we won the Ed McKenzie talent contest, Battle of the Champions. That was pretty exciting. From there, I went to Michigan State, where I had an inglorious 3-year study, really a lot of extracurricular activities.
That's where you got your start as an MC, right? You were the guy who was the host.
That's right. Yep. I felt very comfortable, which is really weird if I think about it. I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners are only children, but you wouldn't think that an only child would be so gregarious or outgoing or comfortable with large crowds. But anyway, over the period of that 3 years I was at Michigan State, I was pretty comfortable. Then came the harsh reality of getting a job in New York City.
Why did you want to go to New York from Michigan?
I don't know if you're familiar with the way that state universities are run. If you live in the state, you really get an amazing discount for admissions. But my dad got promoted to Pennsylvania, to a job in Pennsylvania. So no longer could I qualify for the reduced.
Interesting. What was your dad's line of work, Noel?
A production manager for the Gates Rubber Company.
Got it. So they move him from Michigan to Pennsylvania. You can no longer get your Michigan State deal as an in-state resident. So that brings you to New York City.
Brought me to Pennsylvania and a camera shop. I was busy working in a camera shop in Michigan. So I had a certain talent and was able to get a job in Rosemont, Pennsylvania, right on the Pike. But I'm an hour and a half from New York City. I'm going to hear the jazz festival at Rikers Island. I'm really into Brubeck. I'm into Charlie Bird on guitar. Really no folkies at all in my back history.
That's so interesting because you talk about, growing up with the Birds of Paradise were based on old R&B music, and now you're jazz. You haven't even mentioned folk music yet.
No. I'm an ingenue, but I play chess, and I get a job with a photographic chemical company in New York, and for a year, going with the other employees, Vince Arado in particular, good buddy who's passed away. But anyway, we'd go down to the village to play chess because that's what you could do in the village. It was such a bohemian place. They had tables set up. You could order a cup of coffee and stay there for an hour and a half and play an entire game of chess. Nobody was hustling you along. And there was some poetry in the background occasionally. But by and large, it was for chess. And then one night, I arrived and the table was missing that we always played at. And there was a stage there instead. And I said, what's going on? They said, well, we're going to have entertainment here at the Commons. And I said, well, what do you have to do to become part of that? Drawing on a comfortable experience at Michigan State, not even thinking about the Birds of Paradise and music so much, though I had kept up on the guitar. And they said, well, come down and audition. So I'm working a photographic chemical job with a 3-piece Brooks Brothers suit. And I come down to the village and audition. And I guess I was so quirky because by that time I had developed what Bob Dylan referred to later in my life as the toilet repertoire. I was able to do the sound effect of a flushing toilet to the extent that an audience would crack up. And
I have to cut you off there for a second because I saw you speak a few weeks ago in person, and I would say that you delighted, but maybe horrified is the better word, the audience with your toilet routine. So I must ask if it's possible to do, the old expression, hum a few bars. I don't know what you say when it comes to a toilet impersonation.
Can you pull a few handles? Maybe. Actually, I think it's recorded somewhere.
For those who have not had the pleasure of hearing Noel's Toilet Man routine, it sounds just like a toilet. It's unbelievable, uncanny.
It is, and so much of it has to do with the understanding from my radio workshop days in high school of the effect of proximity to a microphone and what that does. All of that. Well, anyway, I got the job, and not being full of social graces, I just began to show up later and later, and sometimes not at all, for my work at the photographic chemical company. But all was forgiven about 6 months later when I confessed that, yes, I was not going to come to work anymore because I had found a job in the village. The whole office staff came down to hear me do the toilet, among other things.
What was the name of the venue, did you say?
From the Commons, I moved to the Cafe Wa, which was on the corner in a much bigger establishment.
Right.
And then from the Cafe Wa, I went to I would suppose, even at the time, was seriously regarded as the better of the coffee houses in the village, which was the Gaslight.
Right, which is famous now from the Bob Dylan movie and from, every history that you'll learn about Greenwich Village and the folk music scene in the late 50s, early 60s. I know, you probably a year ago got asked a ton of questions about the Bob Dylan movie because you're actually portrayed in it. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs in between?
Yeah, I have a feeling that this new one about Dylan going electric at Newport is going to be a more rewarding glimpse into him and that incredible burst of energetic response to his works.
Right.
It's going to be a little bit more accurate. I thought that the Complete Unknown was kind of fluffy, actually.
Right. Got it. As the MC at the Gaslight, is it part of your gig is to decide who's going to perform? And yes. People would come to you and say, please, Noel, put me on.
Well, maybe without the please. But Bobby wandered in. Well, I can't remember the season that it was, but asked if he could do a guest set. And we always encourage people to come up, do, 15, 20 minutes. And I said, sure. And I had no idea who he was and brought him up on stage. And he did, in a raspy kind of voice, some Guthrie tunes, nothing original that I can recall. He was reasonably well regarded by the audience. But, we had our own coterie of really great talent. We had Dave Van Ronk, we had Tom Paxton, these were Len Chandler. We had real buried folks in the folk idiom, from whom, parenthetically now, I was learning to recognize, the talent of drawing on past history to relate events that had somehow an unusually perceptive bearing on what we were going through right now.
Right.
And that was in the late 50s and the 60s. But anyway, so Dylan's up on stage and he does okay. And he's leaving. I said, what's up for you next? He said, I'm going to sing at a chess club in New Jersey. And I said, well, great. Good luck. It was nice having you here. Drop by when you get a chance. Okay, I will. About 2.5 or 3 months later, he comes back. He said, can I do a bit? And I said, sure. Figuring that I'm going to get the same old repeat of the Woody Guthrie music and the same nasal voice. And he gets on stage, and the first song, at least the first one I recall because it knocked me out so much, was his version of a song that bore a striking resemblance to an old folk song called The Buffalo Skinner. Now, I don't know if you know the lyric of The Buffalo Skinner, but it's a song about a guy that goes out west during the Depression days, gets a job skinning buffalo, and at the end of the season, when he gets paid, the owner of the company pays him in skins, buffalo skins. And he says, well, what am I supposed to do with these? And he says, take it to the general store. They treat it like money. And sure enough, he goes to the general store and gets his provisions for moving on further west. Well, anyway, back to the Gaslight. Dylan's on stage and he starts this song about a guy who gets a job at a chess club in New Jersey. And at the end of his gig, he gets paid with chess pieces. And he says, this is the talking blues that Bob's doing. And he says, well, what am I supposed to do with these? And the owner of the chess club says, just take him to the bartender and he'll treat it like money. And the end of Bob's song, I can't remember, but it was the talking blues. He gets a beer, gives the bartender a king, and gets 2 rooks and a pawn.
And this is taking an old folk song called The Buffalo Skinners and completely changing it up and deconstructing it to tell the story of how for the past few months he's been playing in New Jersey at a chess club. How brilliant is that?
Yeah. And what a grasp then of the larger picture of folk music.
Yeah. And at that moment, you probably realized that he was not your typical folk singer.
That's right. I mean, Ramblin' Jack Elliott was, talented, certainly could emulate Dylan, probably even better than Bobby did in those days. But to be able to take the format and the concept and apply it to a different period of time and a different circumstance, and yet draw the same humor or the same conclusion from it was pretty remarkable. Well, at that time, Pete, I was just getting to know Peter and Mary as compatriots, which is a whole other story unto itself.
Where does Albert Grossman come in? Because I know that you're responsible for introducing Dylan to Albert Grossman, right?
Yeah. Not that it would ever have been avoidable, because Albert used to haunt the village.
In preparing for getting ready to talk to you today, it's amazing how many times Albert Grossman's name comes up. It sounds like he was everywhere.
He was. He had a belief, I think, a deeper sense of what folk music could mean, or what folk, perhaps he understood in much the same way that Dylan understood the framework of the Buffalo Skinners. I think Albert understood the framework of folk music's capacity to touch people in the present day with using forms from long ago.
Right.
Certainly his management of, Ian and Sylvia, Odetta. I mean, all of these beautiful purveyors of folk music that Albert handled had a consistency, a kind of a moral constance, as it were, in terms of their paying attention to the world in which we live.
Right. So Albert was managing Peter, right? And was it his idea to form a trio with you, with Peter, Mary, and then you as the final piece of the trio?
According to what Peter told me, yes, it all came from Albert. Of course, there's that story while they're in the construction mode of Albert being at a guitar store with Peter, and Peter looking up at the wall and saying, oh, now there's an interesting looking woman, seeing a picture of Mary up on the wall. And Albert says, yeah, she's got a good voice too, if you can get her to work. And we never really knew what that meant.
Do you remember the first time that you met Peter and Mary?
Oh, sure. Well, no, Mary I knew because the Gaslight was right across the street from where she lived.
So she would pop up. Would she go on at night?
I helped her overcome her stage fright by creating an arrangement of an old folk tune. So she would come and sing that one tune with me accompanying her. But I knew her, she was a very friendly, how should I say, emissary for the Italian community, which lived in Greenwich Village. And she introduced me to Columbus Day events, walked me down to the fair. So we knew each other both personally and...
Got it. And so Peter was the last one that you would meet in the trio then?
Right. Peter visited her. She gave me a phone call and said, there's a guy here with a guitar. Can we come over and visit? And that was the beginning.
And what was the first song that you remember singing together and harmonizing on?
Oh, you know what the answer to that is.
No, I'm very curious. It's not the Toilet Man song, I assume.
No, we could not. Well, the thing about folk music, for all of its blessings, is that there are also many variations of similar tunes. So we could not agree on a tune, either the chords or the words of songs that we tried to sing together initially. So we finally just gave up the ghost and said, okay, how about Mary Had a Little Lamb? So we sang a cappella, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and it was so natural and so forthcoming. Peter would sing melody, Mary and I would lock into a harmony.
Wow.
Mary would sing melody, Peter and I would lock into a harmony. It helped, I think, that our ranges were pretty wide. Peter had a tenor voice, but he could go down to a baritone, and I had a quasi-bass voice that could get up to a tenor, and Mary's contralto was just gorgeous wherever she was. But I would imagine she didn't test her range so much.
Right.
Much of our harmony depended on Peter and I moving around Mary.
Got it. So the three of you singing Mary Had a Little Lamb, the light bulb goes off and you realize that, wow, the three of us sound really good together.
That's exactly right. That's exactly how it happened. So Peter said, let's work up a repertoire. Well, in the village, as Mary is wont to say, everybody had a project. Here was our project.
Right.
So I was working at the Gaslight. That was when I went through the Buffalo Skinner phase with
Bobby.
Yep. Knowing that we were going to work up this trial repertoire for Albert and do an audition. And we did the audition in Mary's apartment, and John Court, Albert's associate, said, if nothing happens, you're going to happen. And Albert said, have you thought of a name for the group? Well, we were thinking the Willows because we were all kind of lanky. But when Albert said, I think you should call the group Peter, Paul, and Mary, we all remembered that line from another folk song that had, I saw Peter, Paul, and Moses playing Ring Around the Roses, and I'll whoop the guy that says it isn't so. Well,
right. That's a song called I Was Born 10,000 Years Ago. It's an old folk song.
I was born about 10,000 years ago. There ain't nothing in the world that I don't know. I saw Peter, Paul, and Moses playing Ring Around the Roses. I licked the guy that says it isn't so.
But your name, your birth name, was not Paul.
No, but the Peter, Paul, and M sound was there in our head and hearts. So, but I immediately pivoted on a dime and said, all right, listen, I'll take it on as a middle name.
Did you have a middle name?
I did, Carol, Carol, because I was born around Christmas time.
So you were Noel Carol Stookey, and all of a sudden, because of this folk song with the lyric of Peter, Paul, and Moses, okay, I'll take on a new middle name.
Yeah. I thought it was the least objectionable, but boy, did I underestimate the power of fame.
Crazy.
I mean, Paul took me over.
Right.
Though in 1970, essentially, I took my first name back for any of the solo stuff that I did after that.
So is Paul your legal middle name?
Oh, probably now. I mean, 7 years,
It's your common law legal.
It's my common. Right. Exactly. That's what it is.
So at what point does Albert put you on the road? At what point does Albert get you a record deal with Warner Brothers?
Almost immediately. Certainly, we opened at the bitter end. And I suppose it seems really silly to refer to it as cute, but here was a trio with 6 songs in their repertoire. You can't do an hour and a half show with 6 songs.
Right.
So at the bitter end, Peter would go on first and do 20 minutes of solo material. And really, Peter, because he had studied folk music at Cornell, really had the folk repertoire. Then he would introduce me. I would come on for 20 minutes and do The Toilet, as well as some other songs, some of them embarrassing attempts to be folky. But by and large, I've been so fortunate in discovering early that transparency is the key to getting away with just about anything.
Right.
I did my 20 minutes, and then we would introduce Mary, who would come up, and we would do our 30 minutes with Mary. So it was Peter, Paul, and Mary in that order.
Wow.
And the solo, actually, there are two things to think about, Pete. If we had been the Willows, would we have had solo careers by Peter, solo careers by Paul,
right.
solo careers by Mary? I don't think so.
Right.
The name, in a sense, contributed to the concept that we were solo entities who came together to sing.
Right. And once again, speaks to the genius of Albert Grossman, because he was thinking, probably, to use the chess analogy, he was probably thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead, too.
Well, that could have been very well. I had never asked him about that. That's right. Gordon Lightfoot was also part of the Albert Grossman, John Cort.
The names that come up in this era, one thing that I'm fascinated by as an A&R person is the amount of young songwriters that show up for the first time or the very, very, very early in their career on your albums. I think the first time that Laura Nyro got a cut was with you guys with And When I Die.
And when I die, when I'm gone, there'll be one child born and a world to carry on. There'll be one child born to carry on.
That could be, and certainly John Denver.
John Denver, Gordon Lightfoot, Eric Anderson, like all these names who are legendary names. You guys were kind of song hunters. You were songwriters in your own right. Specifically you and Peter, but to find songs, you recognize the talent of these amazing young writers like a John Denver or a Gordon Lightfoot or a Laura Nyro, whose repertoire has stood the test of time now.
Yeah, I'm not sure yes, they were talented writers. I think that the bottom line for the three of us always has been, all three of us agreed that this is a moving song and that we should do it.
Right.
If any one of us said no, we didn't do it. And there were a couple of tunes that we lost that way.
And any ones that you're smacking yourself in the head all these years later that you didn't do?
Yeah, there's one, but I can't remember what it is now. So I've effectively dealt with it.
Right. No harm, no foul. So what do you remember about recording the first album?
That was recorded in a jingle studio. Bill Schwartow was the engineer, as I recall. And of course, it was mostly live. Multitrack did exist, but not multi-tracking.
Right.
That is to say, we had the ability to mix the voices a little bit differently, or the instrumentation a little bit differently after the song was recorded. But nothing was overdubbed. So it was all, in a sense, live. And if there were mistakes made, then we would cut from take 1 to take 6.
So it doesn't sound like the actual recording of the self-titled debut album took a long time.
I think we sweated over it, probably more than most folks would have allowed. But then again, we had Albert in the control room, and we had Milt Oken as our musical director.
Right. That's another name that comes up a lot. And that's a name that is unfortunately not as well known today as it should be. Milt Oken, obviously now most remembered for his work with John Denver.
Yeah, absolutely. And a kind man. And one thing I want to establish, just because I think it's a righteous thing to point out, Milt Oken was our musical director and was succeeded later by Robert de Cormier. But a musical director for Peter, Paul, and Mary was more like a scorekeeper, literally and figuratively, than a musical director. Occasionally, Milt or Robert would make a suggestion of how we could accomplish something we were aiming for, but not being intuitively able to pull off. But mostly they were there to remind us the day or the week after we had a rehearsal of the parts that we had initially thought of for this particular song, whatever that particular song happened to be.
Right.
So we were really our own arrangers, always were.
Well, the big hit that came off that debut album was If I Had a Hammer, and that was a song that, had you guys been singing it as part of your repertoire, or was that something that you picked to record on the album?
Yeah, that was certainly part of our repertoire, but that was not the first hit.
Right, Lemon Tree was the first hit.
That's right. Picked off by a disc jockey. In those days, disc jockeys reported to a sheet that kept track of all of the radio play across America. And if one disc jockey, and this was Buck Herring, clung to the playing of a particular track, other radio stations would say, well, what's going on? How come? And
so it was Buck who picked Lemon Tree off the album.
Lemon Tree, yep.
Lemon tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat. Lemon tree, very pretty, and the lemon flower is sweet, but the fruit of the poor lemon is impossible to eat.
And Lemon Tree obviously would be a bigger hit a few years later for Trini Lopez, who seemed to be following you with his choice of repertoire.
Because he did If I Had a Hammer as well.
And then, your version of If I Had a Hammer wasn't the first single, but it was the big single, bigger than Lemon Tree, just in terms of chart position. It also won you your first Grammy.
If I had a hammer, I'd a hammer in the morning, I'd a hammer in the evening, over this line. I'd a hammer out danger, I'd a hammer out of warning, I'd a hammer out love between my brothers and my sisters, over this line. Ooh.
I remember as a kid going through my parents' record collection and stumbling on this album and noticing the iconic album cover that I didn't realize until later was designed by Milton Glaser.
Yeah, I was going to mention Milt. Yeah.
And he did a lot of work for the trio throughout most of your albums. Milt Glaser, for those that don't know the name, you would know his iconic work, the I Love New York, I Heart New York logo, the DC Comics logo, and, all the brilliant work that he did with the trio.
And Dylan with the serpents coming out of his hair.
Yes, the iconic Dylan poster for sure.
Yeah.
The next album was Puff the Magic Dragon, and that was a song that Peter had written in Cornell. Want to give us a couple of lines about Puff?
Yeah. Peter roomed with his roommate at Cornell was a fellow by the name of Lenny Lipton. And Peter came back to the room one day. Lenny wasn't there, but curled up in the typewriter were the first two verses of Puff the Magic Dragon. Peter was so struck by it that he set it to music and completed the writing, which I got to tell you, Pete, people are still trying to complete the writing because they really don't they want Puff alive, they don't want Jackie to leave him. And, honestly, in the later performances of the trio, we changed to the last chorus so that it said Puff the Magic Dragon lives by the sea, because by that time the audience has been singing the chorus with us.
Right. So Puff is immortal now.
Puff is immortal.
Puff the Magic Dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Puff the Magic Dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu.
So the first album was actually, the debut album goes to #1 on the Billboard album chart, and it stays there for close to 2 months. I mean, you're 25 years old. I mean, how does this feel? It's like a rocket ship.
Yes, really heady, and really was not prepared for it at all. I got a little crazed. And, by the time the third album, the In the Wind album came out, we had 3 albums in the top 6 at the same time.
That's crazy. The second album was called Moving. That had Puff on it. That album, I love the details, getting in the weeds on this stuff. That album never got to number one. It spent 8 weeks at number two, and it was held back by actually one album for 7 of the 8 weeks and another album for 1 of the 8 weeks.
West Side Story?
Incorrect. I would have thought it would have been the Von Meter album, but that's incorrect too. The correct answer is Andy Williams' Days of Wine and Roses.
Oh my God.
And that was for 7 of the 8 weeks, but the very first week at number 2, an album that nobody remembers. So many years later, Frank Fontaine's Songs I Sing on the Jackie Gleason Show. So there you go.
Oh my God. Pete, that is fantastic.
I love that. Then the In the Wind album goes back to number 1, and that obviously is the album that has Blowin' in the Wind. So talk about, you guys recording Blowin' in the Wind. You obviously recorded a bunch of Dylan songs on that album. Also, Don't Think Twice, also Quit Your Low Down Ways. So talk about Blowin' in the Wind because it's such an iconic recording.
A little bit about Blowing in the Wind, but first how we got it. We were working at the Gate of Horn, which was a club that Albert had a piece of a long time ago with his partner, John Court. And at halftime, or maybe it was at the end of the evening, Albert had an acetate from Bobby Dylan, and it had Don't Think Twice on it. It had Blowin' in the Wind. And from that acetate, we had first crack at doing the song ourselves. Bob wasn't really all that well known yet.
This is 1963, to put it in perspective to the audience.
Or it might have been 62 when we heard the acetate. But the song became really the galvanizing piece of the civil rights movement for many of us. We sang it at the March on Washington. And oddly enough, Dylan and Baez were at the March on Washington singing as well.
Right.
But we had stolen that song from Bobby's repertoire. And by virtue of it being so popular, and with 250,000 people there to be present at the march and to hear Dr. King, they also sang, and they all knew the lyrics to it because of radio, and that's what radio was in those days.
Right. I mean, I read that Mary turned to you and Peter and said, "This is history."
Yeah, we are watching history, is what she said.
And now, a group of singers who have come to help express in song what this great meeting is all about. I give you now Peter, Paul, and Mary.
How many times must the cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. The answer is blowing in the wind.
Back to Dylan, he actually wrote the liner notes for the In the Wind album. And I'd like to recite a few lines because it's just so beautifully poetic, if I may. And Peter, Paul, and Mary are now carrying the feeling that was inside them walls, up the steps to the whole outside world. And once you know the feeling, it don't change, it can only grow. For Peter's grown, and Paul's grown, and Mary's grown, and the times they've grown. Bob Dylan, 1963.
Yeah.
These. There's also a picture on the back of the album sleeve of the trio playing at the March on Washington, shot from behind with the Washington Monument straight ahead in the distance. And, this is history.
Yeah, that was Mary's husband, Barry Feinstein, who took that shot. A lot of people think that was the actual march. That was actually the rehearsal prior to the march.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I noticed, kind of deep diving on that album, the In the Wind album, I noticed the name in the songwriter credits of, was it Elaine Mazzetti? Is that Peter's sister?
Peter's sister. Uh-huh.
And so he credited her to make sure that some of the royalties went to her?
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, she wasn't an actual participant in the writing, though, one would be hard-pressed to diffuse her impact on Peter as an older sister. But nonetheless, yeah. That was when we were learning about the publishing business.
Right.
And, yeah.
Very, very interesting. And then, so like we said, it's kind of a rocket ship, and the rocket ship continues through the 60s. Albums like A Song Will Rise and See What Tomorrow Brings, an album, and then obviously
1700.
Right, album 1700 comes out in 67, and that includes Leaving on a Jet Plane, which is released in 67 but doesn't become a single until 69. And I assume the lyric of Leaving on a Jet Plane, as written by John Denver, there's a lot of people who connect with it because of what's going on with the soldiers leaving for Vietnam.
So kiss me and smile for me. Tell me that you'll wait for me. Hold me like you'll never let me go. I'm leaving on a jet plane. I don't know when I'll be back again. Oh, babe, I hate to go.
And coming back from Vietnam in body bags. Absolutely. Yeah. That also didn't that album have I Dig Rock and Roll Music on it?
It did. And that's a song that you wrote. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I wrote it with my good friend Jim Mason and David Dixon.
I dig rock and roll music and I love to get the chance to play and sing it. I figure it's about the happiest sound going down today. The message may not move me or mean a great deal to me, but hey, it feels so groovy to say.
That led to a lot of work with Dave Dixon, including a cartoon for Warner Brothers called Norman Normal. That track shows up later on some album as well.
Right. That's a song you guys wrote that Warner Brothers animated into an actual cartoon, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting about album 1700, the name was named because it was the catalog number. There's nothing like deep or mysterious about that.
And we were disappointed. We didn't want 1700. We wanted something like 1649 or, something intriguing.
Right.
Yeah, we were bummed.
But what's interesting about that album is, for a folk trio, the guest players on this album, Paul Butterfield, Harvey Brooks, I mean, some of the Electra Cats are now showing up.
Yeah. And the cover photo, that was Peter's old car that he bought, his antique car. And that's my house. Betty and I lived on Bedford Street in Greenwich Village until 1970.
And that's the album where you're kind of dressed up as an homage to Bonnie and Clyde, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned your wife, Betty. You and Betty got married very young, and you've been married now over 60 years.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we got married in 63, about a week and a half after the March on Washington.
Wow. Talk about an eventful year.
Talk about an eventful year.
So at what point does the trio decide to take a hiatus?
Pretty much my decision. The group is getting a little uncomfortable with my proselytizing on stage about Jesus and what a change that has made in my life.
Well, let's pause for a second. Can you talk about the evening in Texas where you realized that this was going to be a very important part of your life?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm approached backstage by a guy I've never seen before, said, can I speak with you? And that is not an unusual occurrence. But the fact that he was backstage was unusual because usually security is more severe than that. I said, sure, I'll look for you. And then I sought him out after in a crowd of people. I recognized him. I said, what is it you wanted to talk to me about? I said, I want to talk to you about the Lord. And I could just feel my heart going, the bump, the bump, the bump, the bump. By that time, as you kind of accurately suggested or forecast, I was enamored by myself. I could do no wrong. I was all powerful. Anything I wanted, anywhere I wanted to go, anybody I wanted to be with. So I really abused, in a sense, my family to a certain extent, myself to a certain extent. So this message came at a great time, and I just, got down on my knees and said, I'm sorry. And that changed my life to the point that Peter recognized it. Because, when you go through severe changes, you're grasping and you're a child in a new circumstance, you're kind of grasping for the language to use. To the embarrassment of the trio, I was using Christian language, to a very mixed Jewish, Christian, Muslim audience. And to a large extent, I think, if not insulting them, I certainly was challenging them by the specifics of my language. But I'm a songwriter. And so metaphorically, to be able to move into a position of talking about how important spiritual faith is to all of us, present company included, that was a transition that had to happen. And I think to a large extent happened most publicly through the creation of the wedding song.
Right. Let's talk about that. So the trio breaks up in 1970. And at what point does Peter get engaged to, was it Eugene McCarthy's niece?
That's right.
So he's engaged and he asks if you would honor the two of them with a song for their wedding.
Yeah.
Is this post breakup of the trio?
Yes.
So this is 1970-ish. And you say, okay, and then you ask for some divine inspiration.
I said, the prayer was, how would you, capital Y, manifest yourself at Peter's wedding? Those are the exact words I used in the prayer. And so the lyric therefore followed, I am now to be among you at the calling of your hearts. Embarrassedly changed to, he is now to be among you, when my wife pointed out that I might be accused of announcing myself as the second coming.
The union of your spirits here has caused him to remain. For whenever two or more of you are gathered in his name, there is love. There is love.
So did those lyrics just flow through you after you had made that ask?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
So as a result of that, I mean, this song obviously is a standard now. There Is Love, the wedding song. You decided, when we talked about publishing earlier, you decided that this is not a song that you can take credit for. And so you set up a nonprofit called the Public Domain Foundation, where all of the royalties of this song, and there were plenty, because not only did you have the hit as a solo, but it was later covered by everybody from
Tula Clark
to Harry Belafonte, and everybody in between. Matthew Southern Comfort and the Letterman and, Captain and Tennille, it's like,
oh, that's right.
So all of the royalties go to this public domain foundation, which later, maybe a few decades later, your daughter Liz starts a nonprofit called Music to Life, which is funded by the Public Domain Foundation. And in the last 25 years, this nonprofit, Music to Life, has done such incredible things through the royalties of There Is Love and other funding. Do you want to talk a little bit about the nonprofit and the charity work?
Yeah, it started off as a kind of a talent contest for singer-songwriters of change. And we had 3 recordings and 3 appearances at the Threadgill stage at Kerrville Folk Festival. And then Liz, through deeper conversations with the artists, discovered that there was more than just singing at a benefit dinner involved, that they had communities that they wanted to repair, encourage, and they could do that, some with music, whether it was songwriting, or some with actual hands-on work, like working in jails, working with the incarcerated, certainly testimonies for climate. So Music to Life has become a huge organization now. I mean, they just just recently got a $500,000 grant from the Mellon Foundation.
Wow.
To be this academy for singer-songwriters. You can find out about it, musictolife.org. There's a lot of information online about it now.
That's awesome. And it's such great work. Before we wrap up, just a couple of questions. You are still recording and you're still touring. I noticed that there are dates, through at least the first part of 2026. Do you still enjoy going out and playing?
Yes. Yeah. As long as I have something to say, although, I think you'll get a kick out of this, Pete. The closer of my shows for the past several years has been a song that I wrote called In These Times, that speaks to so many of the circumstances we face. And about 6 months ago, I decided that I would open with it. And now when I say, after the first song, I say that was my closer, people laugh nervously because they, well, what's going to follow? But the curious thing is we sort of need that challenge at the beginning. And then for the next hour and a half, I'm just talking about love and caring for one another and stepping out with those thoughts and that heart sense.
Right. You've been working on your autobiography with Gene Finley. Any news on that?
Yeah, we're about 2.5 chapters away from it. I still don't have a publisher. I suppose in this day and age, one of the things you can do is self-publish, but I can't help but feel that somebody's going to want to go, oh, this book is called There Is Love. Oh, isn't that a famous song? Oh, I could publish that.
Yes. So, well, let's put it out into the universe because this is a story that deserves to be read by everybody. You talked about your daughter, Liz, but your wife, Betty, also does incredible work with her One Light, Many Candles Foundation. You want to talk about that as well?
Well, when she was at Harvard, she began to put together a outreach to many faiths based on the concept that there was a single entity that was referred to in all faiths as God, and that it was the same entity. And with the basis of many readings that she brought with her, when she went to Wesley for a year, she developed this program called One Light, Many Candles, to which I am the organ monkey. I sing a couple of songs, and she reads from, a half dozen different spiritual disciplines around the world. And I think it's very healing, particularly in this time. We don't do as much of it now as we used to, but it's still online.
But what a great concept to use music to unite the global community spiritually. It's beautiful.
Yes, I think so too. But yeah, thanks for metaphor.
Yeah.
When you think about what metaphor does, the capacity for it to teach and to reach people of different persuasions because it portrays a commonly felt circumstance without using the literal word, which carries all other kinds, carries a background of learning.
Right. Right. So, like I said, we're recording this in late November 2025. Peter passed away earlier this year. Mary passed away earlier. How does it feel, to be carrying on the tradition without them?
Well, lonely and a little overwhelming, since I was the latecomer to the folk party in 1960, and I'm a latecomer to many of the responsibilities now that were incurred by Peter and Mary in their lives, but to which I am given credit for. I'm just trying to be, judicious, kind, effective, and still forthcoming about what I think the hopes for humanity are. And I'm trying to do it with music and the occasional personal appearance.
Well, the fact that you've been doing it yourself for going on 65 years now, obviously the accolades including multiple Grammy Awards and multiple Platinum and Golds and the Grammy Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. It's the music that you and Mary and Peter created and you created yourself. It's going to outlive us all. And so, it's just a very, very special thing. And so with that in mind, it was so special to me to be able to talk to you. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Pete. I enjoyed it too.
It ain't no use in calling out my name, gal, like you never did before. It ain't no use in calling out my name, gal, I can't hear you anymore. I'm a-thinking and a-wondering all the way down the road. I once loved a woman, a child I'm told. I gave her my heart, but she wanted my soul. Don't think twice, it's all.
A very special thank you to Noel Paul Stookey for joining us this week. From the village coffee houses to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, from the harmonies of Peter, Paul, and Mary to the enduring grace of the wedding song There Is Love, Noel's music has helped define not just an era, but a spirit, one rooted in compassion, justice, and the belief that a song can change the world. To explore more of Noel's work, past, present, and future, visit noelpaulstookey.com and check out the incredible impact of his nonprofit Music to Life, which empowers the next generation of artist activists at musictolife.org. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for another episode of Rock and Roll High School.
Rock and Roll High School is a presentation of Pure Tone Music, produced by Pete Ganbarg with assistance from Steve Leeds, Joe Pomerico, Dana Stenson, Aaron Manuza, Christina Katsamanides, and Rich Mahan. Please visit our website at rockschoolpodcast.com for past episodes and information on what's coming next. All rights reserved.